Hello, my name is Bob, otherwise known as Broncourt1 on YouTube, and in this video I'm going to show you my O-gauge train layout. I'm going to tell you all about it, go through all the details, show you the engines, the rolling stock, the scenery, the buildings, how the layout's made, how it's powered. I know it's been a few years since I've made a video, and I'm probably going to say and do things that I said in those videos. I think the newest one is 3 years old, and they go back to being 7 years old. Instead of watching all those videos, I'm just going to be as thorough and detailed as I can be in this video and just show you everything at once. And let's get going. Here is an overall view of the layout. It is 14 feet wide by 20 feet long. Again, it is an O scale layout. It is 2x4 framing underneath with OSB plywood on top and some circa 1975 paneling along the bottom, which I felt looked good anyway. This is the turntable area. If I was to give it a measurement, I would say it's 7 feet long by 6 feet wide. It's not really a square or anything, it's an odd shape. And this is my cabinet area for where I store all my parts. These drawers slide out. This drawer here gives me a way to work on the engines. Keep all my tools right here. And over here, this is one of the two doors that I have that gets me under the layout. This just pops off like so. You crawl underneath and do whatever you gotta do. Close it back up again. This is the turntable area where I'm going to store all my engines. Well, I am storing all my engines. There was at one time a 24-inch Atlas turntable right where you see that little circle there. The bigger circle is a layout of a 34-inch turntable, which I plan on getting sometime between now and the fall. And the 34-inch table solves a few of my issues that I have. One of them being is I didn't have enough area to put my engines. Well, if this 34-inch turntable works out the way it should, I'm going to be able to park a lot of engines on here, including the big steam engines, which was one of the regrets I had about the layout, is I had nowhere to park the big steam engines. And this solves that problem. Not only will I have a spur that goes towards the tunnel, which takes you out to the just past the lake, but I'm going to bring a spur. I'm going to cut a 072 switch in right where the pole is and run a track down. There's part of it, and that's going to run right into the turntable, and I will be able to park and or turn around all my big steam engines. Here's the collection of engines. I have 31 engines in all. 20 of them are MTH, 11 of them are Lionel. They are not all here in the turntable area. I have 2 on the layout, 5 on shelves, and 1 is out of commission, getting a new board. I have 5 steamers altogether. The 4 you see on the turntable and the Camelback on the shelf over there. Rolling stock, my rolling stock has evolved over the years to where I used to buy individual pieces because they look good to me, but my taste has evolved into where I buy sets of them now, like sets of tankers, sets of coal hoppers, the hopper map cars from MTH Real King. There's 28 of them. I have all of them. Same applies to my MTH Rail King die-cast reefer cars. I have every one that they came out with along the top 2 rows there, led by the 2 engines at the front. So in time, when I find sets I like, the MTH Premier tanker cars you see are going to be phased out. So eventually they'll be available. This is where all the power comes from. I run a MTH Z4000. This side does the track power, and only the track power. This channel is going, well, it did do, and it will again do, the turntable area. In the back it's got a 14 volt and a 10 volt set of terminals. My 10 volt terminals do the block signals that I have on the main line, and the 14 volt does the crossing gates and things that don't mind 14 volts. This is one of those older Lionel ZWs. I use it exclusively for accessories. Each channel is set to a certain voltage. This one here is set for all the building lighting and some of the street lighting. This one here is set for the dwarf signals on the layout, on the where all the switches are. This one over here is for the switches themselves. That's pegged all the way to 20 volts. And this one here is for the smokestacks that I have on the layout and anything that likes to have 16 to 18 volts. Okay, now we are under the layout. And this is my newly renovated electrical system that I have for the layout. What I had before was basically a rat's nest. One thing after another was added, and then added again, and added again. And the next thing you knew, both my AIUs were stacked on top of each other, and they were buried in wire. And unless you really dug down, you didn't know what was what. So it was decided that I would take everything apart and rewire the entire layout. And that's what I did, and this is what I came up with. Those of you that run MTH's DCS, you'll know this is the TIU. This is the DCS AIU number 1, AIU number 2. It runs all your switches and accessories. For those of you that have the MTH DCS remote, you'll know what I'm talking about. There are 8 feeds coming into here. That's what these Romexes are. These are 14 gauge Romex. Why did I use 14 gauge Romex solid? Because I have it. I'm an electrician by trade. I have it. I'm using it. Copper is copper. As long as you can always go bigger in wire size, you can't go smaller. So everything is fed with 14 size 14 wire. I guess I can go over what each one of these does. This is the MTH 10 volt terminal block. Remember when I showed that there's 8 different terminal points between the ZW and the Z4000, and I'm using all 8 of them. They're all over here. This runs like things that want 10 volts. This is all my switches, and they all go up to here. Switches, they're all being used. Almost all my accessory points are being used on both AIUs. I got a couple spares that I want to save for the turntable if needed. Over here, these are 4 different voltages, and I have them marked down here ZW3 or C if you want to be like that, ZW2 or B, there's ZW4 or D, and there's the 14 volt MTH terminal. And each one of these feeds whatever voltage they want. Smokestacks want 16, 18 volts, that's here. The couplers are 14 volts, they're here, and so on and so forth. Everything is organized just the way I want it, and I can see at a glance what goes where now. And when I add things, I'll know where I can add things to. And I will say this, this is the Legacy ground for the Legacy remote base. And I don't know if that's what's going on here, but ever since I've done this, I have had no issues adding MTH engines to my DCS remote while a Lionel engine is on the layout. Before, I couldn't do that. The signals would fight each other, and you had to take everything Lionel off the layout before you could add anything MTH. But now I don't have to, and in fact, I run both engines at the same time with 2 different remotes, and my MTH signal is a 9, a 10, a 9, a 10, mostly a 10. So, there's that. I use 3-rail O-gauge Atlas track and switches for my layout. This is my 2-track main line. This is my 3rd loop that I use to connect between the 2-track main line and the interior lines. And over here, this curve is 081, this is 072, and this is 063. So I can run all my big steam engines on the 2-track main line, but I can't run it from here on in. The track rises about 6 inches up to the top of by the cell tower. By the time it gets there, it's 6 inches higher than it was down here. It is on a 2% grade, and what I mean by 2% grade is, from what I read at the time, was that if you took a 2-foot level and you put a 1-inch block at one end, that was your 2% grade. So for every 2 feet of run, you have 1 inch of rise, and that was supposed to be for what I read was the realistic way to have grades, and that's what I did on that. This is what I call the northern rail yard. See, it's got four sidings, and they come together down there by the Atlas building. This rail yard can hold all 28 of my hopper map cars that I have over there, or it can hold 32 Premier tanker cars, and that includes the 3 cabooses and all those counts. And got to take that out of there to make everything work. The cabooses are sitting on dead track. They don't have power to them unless you grab them with an engine and you bring them out a certain way, and the lights will come on. Otherwise, they sit here and the lights are not on. And the same thing's going on with the passenger cars. They sit on dead track. If you see a white tie, it's dead. And it's dead all the way down to the Atlas Y I have down there. This switch right here is supposed to be the beginning of what was known as the Southern Rail Yard, but that never really happened because I ran out of room. I did the best I could with the space I had. I created a siding that I could store cars if I wanted to. We got the fuel and tank, or the fuel and sand area, with the Sunoco tank and the little building, and that's what became of the Southern Rail Yard. Now it's for the GE building. I have some signals on the layout, and they are basically for realism purposes. These two here that you see, they're for the Y, obviously, and the one on the right is operated by the MTH ITAD over there behind the tree, and the one on the left is operated by the ITAD behind the boxcar over here. I have 2 more ITADs over there by the red boxcar that operate these signals here. If you have these signals, I recommend you not go over 10-12 volts with them, because you will burn out the LEDs like I did. This ITAD over here on the 3rd loop, that goes to the signal bridge, which would be the opposite side from what you're seeing. And then I have 2 more ITADs by the blue hopper car, and they operate the 2 signals over there. I have 7 dwarf signals on the layout for the switches. I have 24 switches on the layout, so I bought 7 dwarf signals, and I put them where I felt was the 7 most important switches to know at a glance what position they were in. And a good example is the one that I'm focused in on now. It is currently red because the switch for the switch yard is currently in the switch yard position. And if I hit the straight button on my MTH remote, the switch switches and the light turns green, telling me that a train will go straight through and not head into the train yard. I do have some road signals. These are MTH, and they work fine. I have no problems with them. I have them fed from 2 different ITADs in 2 different directions, and they work good. The other story is the crossing gates. In my opinion, they're junk. This is my second set of MTH crossing gates. I believe, yes, the lights are on right now, even though they're not, the iTag that operates them is not calling for them to be on. Been having problems with them, just like the other set. When I activate them, the lights don't flash while the gates come down. Now when the gates go up, the lights come on. Problem is, the gates don't go up all the way to shut off the lights sometimes. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes one gate's slower than the other. I'm just going to get rid of them and move on to some other brand name. To answer the questions of how I get inside the layout to do anything that I have to do, the pizza place drops down on this side. And on the opposite side, the switcher building drops down to reveal a hole about half the size of the pizza place hole. It's a tight fit. It was a bit of an afterthought, but I can squeeze through and do what I got to do on the right hand side of the layout. I'll show some examples of how I did the hills and the contours and the way I did it, but there's 3 ways I went about doing it. This was the first one. The can of great stuff that you find at any home center. I found it to be an easy way to make hills. Or I use this, the blue foam that you find on any job site between cinder block and brick. And for around the areas around the lake and the contours around the streets, I just use regular play sand that I screened. One thing about this is once you open the can and start spraying with it, you can't just use half of it and put the rest away. You have to use the whole thing. So, which is not a big deal because you could always use more than what you need, and if you don't like what you see, you can scrape away what you don't want. You cannot paint over the great stuff. So I would just take some normal spackle and spackle over it after it got hard. You could cut away the great stuff and form it any way you want, and then you just spackle it. You take your knife and you form it any way you want. And then I would paint it with either this or that, or a combination of them, or I would add a third or a fourth color and do it that way. And then I would use scenic stuff later on, like the Scenic Express Flock and Turf. I got about 15 bottles of that in different colors and different thicknesses. All of my roads are made out of 1/4-inch hardboard. It's rough on one side, flat on the other, easy to paint, easy to cut. We'll go along the lake area here, and you can see where I used real rocks. The rocks are either out of my driveway or out of an aquarium that I used to have. The green is where the foam is. There's real rocks over there. This is a good example of using the blue foam, where I would glue it down in sections and then cut it with a large knife. Typically something like this. And that's basically how I did the stones. The stones in the Y are those little red landscaping stones that I painted. So the stones were white along the lake. They're all also painted. Here's the front end of the switch yard, or the northern switch yard, or even though there is no more southern switch yard. There's the Atlas building, the Atlas switchyard building, and a little parking lot, and some more decorative scenery. Real rocks mixed in with great stuff and spackle. And there's the beginning of the passenger car turnout. The water tower area is blue foam glued together in layers and contoured to slope towards the track, and then you just scenic it like you would anything else. Here's a good example of my layout of how I did the wall here. That is the great stuff foam. Allow it to dry, you spackle it, then you can start painting it and scenicking it any way you want. With a few real rocks thrown in for good measure. Here's another view of the lake area. And that tunnel goes out towards the turntable area, goes through the room. That road goes nowhere. That over there in the corner is the Lionel cell tower, which no longer flashes. The light does work, but the light doesn't flash anymore. And that's about 4 years old. I'm not going to mess with it. And here's the other end of the rail yard. I think I did mention before that on the Atlas decouplers, which I have 7 of on the layout, each one has a little light next to it. And what that does is, when I activate it, the little blue light comes on. It's just an LED mounted to the top of a straw. Just like that. When I activate it, the little blue light comes on and tells me that it's on. In the past, I've left it on by accident and melted it. So that light will keep me from doing that again. This is a side view of the Woodland Scenics Morrison Doors building that I converted to a GE plant. Yeah, the crane's lifting off the old wooden water storage tank. They're going to get rid of that. I got a Lionel Sunoco storage tank in the back. This is the Lionel smokestack. It's got the 4 lights that blink, and looks like fire comes out of the top and smoke comes out of it. It does have its own smoke unit. I got more of the hardboard as the parking lot. Hardboard that's spray painted black, and where the track is, I kind of splashed it with a little bit of rust color to make it look like the rust from the rails has worked its way onto the pavement. And I don't know if you can see it, but there's these street lights. They're from eBay. They're the Chinese street lights you might see on there. They work very well, considering I think it was like $15 for 5 of them or something like that. Really good deal. In fact, the one that I'm pointing at doesn't even work right now. It got bright for 1 second, went off, and never came on again. But everything else, all the other 9 work. And I got 5 more on the way, just as a backup in case this happens again. I've been asked before how I got the curve of that brick wall over there to look as good as it did. Again, hardboard. You can bend that stuff nice and easy. You can form it any way you want, and then you just glue the simulated brick wall to the back of it, and that's what you get. The wetlands area, same thing. Hardboard, painted green along the edges, and a darker blue as you get closer to the center, and then landscape around with the play sand. This here in the last corner is the Lionel Lighthouse, and this is a good example of using the Great Stuff foam and the blue foam that I showed as a combination. And this is also a good example to show where I use these three paints to paint the rock face, the three different textured colored paints, combination of the three, which is there. And then using small stones, small landscaping stones along here that are also painted and glued down. This is hardboard again, painted blue. I am not going to pour any liquid water on it because I know someone's going to come along and just scratch it because it's right along the edge of the layout. And this is a boat ramp here for the guy sitting in the lighthouse. When I did the rail yard, I wanted to make the track look like it had been there for a long time and was poorly maintained, and so what I did was I gave it the illusion that it sunk into the ground, and how I did that was by raising the ground around it, and you guessed it, I used hardboard. Well, he really likes this hardboard, doesn't he? Yes, I do. This road here basically simulates an old gravel road. Maybe it was paved a long time ago and it's been messed with over the years. And how I made that was using N-scale ballast, and you wet it. Well, you put it down, you glue it down, and then you roll it with one of these little wallpaper rollers that I got here. And that's how I did that. And the Coors Brewery has simulated concrete, again with the hardboard. At the MTH Regina's soft ice cream stand is a pretty good example, another example of a N-scale ballast being used as asphalt, and the building sits on top of a simulated concrete pad made of hardboard and spray painted light gray, and the lines are just a pencil line. Here we have two Lionel houses with more of the N-scale asphalt. Here's the front of the GE building. It's got one of them Miller signs on top. I think that's a pretty sharp looking sign. I like that a lot. I have a second one, which is over here. The statewide equipment sale has one. I'm going to try and zoom in on that for you here. I like them. They're pretty sharp. I got one more I'm going to add to the Amtrak passenger building right out front here.